Mara Weston, was standing in my kitchen at 7:15 on a Thursday night, reading the back of a wine bottle like it had personally offended her, and I was trying very hard to pretend I had not already noticed. She was wearing my old Carlton hoodie. She had borrowed it in October. It was now February. I had not asked for it back. "This is from the Okanagan," she said, still reading. "I know. You drove to the Okanagan last summer." "I did. For a weekend. Long weekend." She set the bottle down and looked at me across the kitchen island. "You drove 11 hours for wine." "I drove 11 hours to see a friend and came back with wine. There's a difference." "There really isn't," she said. But she was almost smiling. That was Mara. She could talk you in circles about something completely small and make it feel like the most important conversation you had ever been part of. I had known her for almost 3 years. Since the September she moved into the building across the street from mine in Kensington Market and knocked on my door asking if I had a Phillips head screwdriver because her IKEA shelves were refusing to cooperate. I did not have a Phillips head screwdriver. I had a flathead. She said that was basically useless. I said I would go buy the right one. She said that was unnecessary. I went anyway. We put the shelves together in 90 minutes. She made tea. I stayed until midnight. We called each other friends because that was the easy word. The word that kept everything in a safe lane, where nobody had to examine anything too closely. Tonight was her gallery opening. Not her gallery, technically, but she had curated the entire show for a collective she belonged to on Dundas West, and it had taken her 4 months of evenings and weekends, and 2 full crises about whether the lighting grid was going to cooperate. The opening was at 8. She had showed up at my place at 7, because she said she needed somewhere quiet before walking into a room full of people who would have opinions. What she actually needed was to not be alone with her nerves. I understood that without her saying it. Most things with us worked that way. She poured 2 glasses of the Okanagan Red and pushed one toward me without asking if I wanted it. I did want it, which she also knew. "Tell me the worst case," she said. This was a thing we did. Walk through the worst version of something so it stopped being enormous. The lighting fails. 2 people have the same coat. Someone says the work is derivative. Is it derivative? No. What if someone says it anyway? You say thank you for coming and refill their glass. She held her wine with both hands, looking down at it. Her hair was up, the same way she wore it when she was running, on not enough sleep and needed things out of her face. She had on a dark burgundy dress I had not seen before and the small gold earrings she wore when something mattered. She looked the way she always looked when she was trying not to let anyone see how much she wanted something to go well. "James is going to be there," she said. She said it the way you say something when you have been holding it all afternoon. James was her ex. They had been together for 2 years. He had ended it 6 months ago in the parking lot of a Loblaws on a Tuesday evening, which she had described as so perfectly boring, it almost looped back around to poetic. He had said she was too focused on the collective, on the work, on things that didn't pay enough to count as real ambition. She had said she thought you should marry someone who understood why you got up in the morning. He had no answer for that. She had not cried much. She had come over, sat at this same kitchen island, and worked through an entire order of roti from the place on Augusta, while telling me she was mostly just tired of explaining herself to someone who had already decided not to be curious. That was Mara. She did not collapse. She just reorganized. "Okay," I said. "He texted that he was coming to support the show. Is that what he said?" "Word for word." "Word for word. That's a performance," I said. "He wants to see how you're doing without making it obvious he wants to see how you're doing." She looked at me. "That's exactly what it is." She sounded both annoyed and relieved someone had named it. "I don't want him to see me flustered." "Then don't be helpful." "You won't be," I said. "You're good in rooms. You know it. You just forget right before you walk in. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Will you come early? Before the doors open?" I had already planned to come early. I had cleared my Thursday 2 weeks ago when she first told me the date. "Yeah," I said. "I'll come early." She nodded once like that settled something. Then she picked up her wine and looked around my kitchen in that particular way. She had, like she was taking inventory of something she already knew. We got to the gallery at 7:45. The space was on Dundas West, one of those old converted storefronts with original pressed tin ceilings that someone had been smart enough not to paint over. The lights were warm and low in exactly the way Mara had spent 4 months arguing for with the collective's tech person, and the work on the walls was good. I did not always know how to say why something was good, but I knew it when I stood in front of it and forgot to think about anything else. Mara moved through the space-checking placard heights and sightlines, while I followed, at a pace that made me useful without being underfoot. I straightened 2 chairs near the entrance when the stack leaned. I found an extension cord for the table where the drinks were going, because someone had plugged the hot water kettle too far from the outlet and created a tripping hazard. "Where did you find that?" said the person running the drinks table, whose name was Petra, and who had the look of someone who had been solving small disasters for 3 hours. "Storage room, far left corner." She pointed at me. "You're Mara's friend." "Yeah. She said you were practical." "High praise." She said it like it was a compliment. I took it that way. Petra smiled and went back to setting up glasses. I went back to Mara, who was standing in front of the largest piece in the show, a wide oil painting in blues and grays that looked like Lake Superior in November, which I knew was intentional because she had talked about this piece specifically for 3 weeks. "Sightline is right?" I asked. "It's right." She did not look away from the painting. "The placard is 2 centimeters too low." "I'll fix it." "You don't have to." I fixed it. She did not say anything, but when I came back to stand beside her, she exhaled slightly like something had stopped pressing on her. The doors opened at 8. By 8:30, the room had the comfortable noise of people who were genuinely looking at things, and instead of just being seen looking at things. Mara was in the middle of it, easy and warm, in a way that surprised people who only knew her as intense, shaking hands with the collective members, and talking to a woman from an arts magazine who kept nodding and writing things in a small notebook. I stayed useful. I found coats a place to go when the hook rack filled up. I carried a tray of glasses from the back. When Petra's supply ran low, I talked for 20 minutes with an older man named Gerald, who had a lot of thoughts about whether painting was having a cultural resurgence and was clearly not going to get those thoughts out any other way that evening. Every few minutes I found Mara across the room. She was doing well. Her shoulders were moving naturally. Her laugh was the real one, not the event version. But I also knew her well enough to catch the moment she stopped. She was mid-conversation near the back wall when I saw her posture change. Just slightly. A small tightening across the shoulders. A careful stillness. I looked toward the door. James was better looking than I wanted him to be. That was an honest thing, I will admit. He came in with the particular ease of someone who had decided to seem relaxed. In a dark jacket. That was probably expensive. In a way that did not announce itself. And he looked around the room until he found Mara, with a directness that meant he had been looking for her specifically. She kept talking to the person beside her. She did not flinch, but I had known her for 3 years. I crossed the room. Not fast. Not like I was doing anything in particular. I came to stand near her, and when the conversation she was in found a natural pause, she turned and I was there. Her eyes moved to mine. Something in her face settled. "Julian," she said, and just the way she said my name did a thing to me I was not going to examine right now. "The Gerald situation has been resolved," I said. She blinked. "What?" Gerald situation. There was a Gerald. She almost laughed. The tightness across her shoulders came down half a degree. Then James arrived beside us, with a glass of something, and a smile that had a lot of effort behind it. Mara. He kissed her on the cheek the way people do when they want to seem comfortable with each other. The show looks incredible. Thank you. Seriously. This is exactly the kind of thing you always talked about doing. There was something in the word always that was doing too much work. Like he was reminding her he had been there first. Like that entitled him to something. He looked at me. James, Mara said, this is Julian. We shook hands. His grip was fine. Friend, James said. Yep, I said. He nodded with a smile that did not reach all the way. Great that you could come out, happy to. He turned back to Mara. You really pulled this together. I know how much work it was. Mara's had help, Petra said, appearing from absolutely nowhere with a tray of glasses, which I chose to believe was intentional. Whole collective. Julian spent 45 minutes reorganizing the electrical situation, so nobody sued us. James looked at me again. Versatile. I try. Mara took a glass from Petra's tray and I watched her do the small internal reset she always did before saying something she had been deciding on. Excuse us, she said. I need to show Julian the back room piece. He hasn't seen it installed. She did not wait for his answer. She put her hand on my arm and steered us toward the smaller back gallery, where a series of prints were hung across a single white wall. The second we cleared the doorway, she exhaled. He came, she said, to support the show. He came to see how you looked, I said. And you looked fine. For the record. I know what I looked like. She turned to face me, arms folded loosely, and there was something in her expression that was more direct than usual. I looked like someone who wasn't thinking about him at all. Ah. Because you weren't, because you were standing there. I did not have a quick answer for that, which was unusual for me. She looked at the prints on the wall without looking at them. He used to say I was hard to reach, that I was always somewhere else. Were you? I don't think so. I think I was just somewhere he wasn't interested in going. That was it exactly. I did not say that. She did not need me to. He said something to me once, she continued, quieter now, that I would always choose the work over the person, that eventually everyone figured that out. I looked at her. That's not a warning. That's a blame he wanted to land before he left. She turned toward me then, really turned, not the way you turn toward someone in a conversation, but the way you turn toward someone when you want them to see that what they just said got through. You are very good at that, she said. At what? Saying the one thing that makes the whole structure fall over. I did not know what to do with that exactly, so I looked at the prints on the wall and said, which one is your favorite? She pointed to the third one. A woman in a winter coat on a ferry, looking back at the skyline. Toronto Harbor, early morning light or late evening, hard to tell which. Why, that one? Because you can't tell if she's arriving or leaving, Mara said, and it doesn't matter. She looks like she's exactly where she decided to be. I looked at it for a long moment. Yeah, I said, that's the best one. We stayed in the back gallery longer than we needed to. Neither of us moved toward the door. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at it. The arts writer wants a quote before she leaves. Back to the room. Back to all of it. She straightened first. And for 1 second before she walked out, she looked at me the way she had looked at that painting. Like she was trying to figure out what she was allowed to name. Thank you, she said. For the extension cord and the Gerald and all of it. The extension cord is a little underrated as a romantic gesture, I said. She stopped. A real stop. She looked back at me over her shoulder, and whatever she had been deciding all evening, I watched her decide it right then. Don't say things like that, she said. If you don't mean them. I held her look. I mean them. Something shifted in her face that I had never seen before. Or maybe I had seen it before and had been working very hard to file it somewhere else. She walked back into the main gallery, and I followed her, and neither of us said anything, but something had been left in that back room that was not coming back with us. Write in the comments. Do you think Mara should have said something sooner? Or was this exactly the right moment? By 9:30, the crowd had thinned to the people who were genuinely staying. The ones who had stopped performing at the art and started just being near it. James had left an hour in, with a goodbye that Mara received with the professional warmth of someone thanking a caterer, and after he was gone, her whole posture changed in a way I do not think she noticed. The arts writer got her quote. The collective members took a group photo near the Lake Superior painting. Petra sold 2 prints to a couple who had come in from Oakville and spent most of the night standing in front of the ferry piece until they finally said yes. I watched Mara hear that news. She pressed her lips together hard for exactly 1 second. Then she smiled, and that was the real one too. By 10, the space had gone quiet in the particular way of places that had held a lot of noise, and were now figuring out what they were without it. Petra was stacking glass racks. One of the collective members was rolling up extension cables, and I noticed he was doing it wrong, so I showed him the right way without making a thing of it. Mara found me near the back. She had taken her earrings out and was holding them in one hand. There was a look on her face that happened when everything was over, and she did not have to perform anymore. I had seen it after 2 other openings, after a fundraiser she organized for her building's community garden. After the night, her dad called with the health news, and she held everything together on the phone. And then sat on my floor for an hour and said absolutely nothing. It went well, I said. It went well. She looked at the prints on the wall like she was seeing them for the first time, with nobody watching her see them. The fairy piece sold. I know. I saw your face. What did my face do? It did the thing it does when something you made space for in the world actually works. She looked at me sideways. That's a very specific thing to notice. I've known you for 3 years. You have. The last of the collective members said goodnight and pulled the front door closed behind them. Petra waved from the back, already in her coat, and then she was gone too, and it was just us, and the pressed tin ceiling, and the low warm lights and all the work on the walls. Mara sat down on the low bench in the center of the room, the one meant for people who wanted to stay with a piece longer. She set her earrings down beside her. She looked at the Lake Superior painting. Can I ask you something? She said. Yeah. In the back gallery. She paused. The extension cord comment. I sat down on the other end of the bench. What about it? You said it was a romantic gesture. I did. And then I said don't say it if you don't mean it. Yeah, and you said you meant it. I did. She looked at her hands. Not avoiding, just looking. What exactly did you mean? I had a few options here. I could make it a joke. I could walk it back to something comfortable. I could blame the long evening, and the Okanagan red, and the emotional weight of watching someone you care about handle a hard night beautifully. I meant the part that wasn't about the extension cord, I said. She was very still. Not dramatically, just quiet in the way she got when something landed somewhere real. Julian, she said. Just my name. I know, we've been friends for 3 years. I know that too, and I have been. She stopped, looked up. Her voice was steady but barely. I have been pretending for most of that time that the way you show up for me is just what friends do. It's not, I said. Not the way we do it. She laughed, short and a little shaky. No, it's not. We sat there on the bench with the Lake Superior painting in front of us. And 3 years of grocery runs and late nights, and furniture assembly. And 1 borrowed hoodie. And all the small moments we had been carefully not naming. I told myself, she said, that I didn't want to ruin the one thing that felt steady. I know, I told myself the same thing. That's the same thing James used to say was the problem. That I protected the steady things instead of choosing. That's not the same situation, I said. No. She looked at me directly. Because I actually want this one. There are moments that do not feel like movie moments at all. They just feel like arriving somewhere you were always going to end up, and being a little surprised it happened in a gallery on Dundas West, on a February Thursday after an extension cord, and a painting of a fairy. I reached over and took her hand where it was resting on the bench. She looked down at that for a second. Then she turned her hand over and held mine back. I'm going to need the hoodie back at some point, I said. No, you're not. You're right, I said. I'm not. She leaned her head against my shoulder. The Lake Superior painting hung in front of us in all its gray-blue November honesty. The lights were warm, and the city outside was whatever it always was, and neither of us moved for a long time. I drove her home around 11. The Bloor Street traffic was light, and the radio played something low that neither of us bothered to identify. She had her hand in mine across the console, not making it casual or careful, just doing it. At her building, I walked her to the door. She turned on the step and looked at me. I have another opening in March, she said. For the spring show, I know. You told me in January. You cleared it already, didn't you? 2 weeks ago. She shook her head slowly. How long have you been doing that? Which part? All of it. I thought about it. Honestly thought about it. The Okanagan wine. The extra roadie I ordered when I knew she was coming over. The Phillips head screwdriver I had gone to buy in September 3 years ago, when a flathead would not have worked and I could have just said so. A while, I said. She stepped up once on the front step to be closer to even with me. Then she kissed me, one hand against my jaw. Cold from the February air, and I held on to her coat lapels, like someone who had been practicing steadiness for 3 years, and was finally allowed to stop. We stood there, on a Kensington market sidewalk, in the middle of winter, while someone's dog barked 2 streets over, and a streetcar sounded its horn, somewhere on Dundas. And it did not feel like the beginning of something so much as the middle of something, finally admitting it had already started. The hoodie stays, she said against my coat. The hoodie stays, I agreed. She went inside. I walked home 6 blocks in the cold and felt none of it. A month later, nothing important had changed. She still texted me when she found a wine she thought I should try. I still showed up early when she had something that mattered. We still argued about whether Kensington or Roncesvalles had the better farmers market, which was a debate we had been having since November and would probably never settle, because we were both correct, and neither of us was willing to lose. But the hoodie was officially hers. We stopped calling it borrowed. Some things only needed a name to become true, and some things had been true for so long that naming them was just the last small step of a very long walk home.